We're good. Okay. This is Mary Calorio. I'm the town manager for the town of Killingly. Thank you for those that are joining us online, and thank you for those that are joining us here in the town hall. So we're going to be doing the public information meeting with regards to the renovations at Westfield Avenue. And that's going to include the relocation of the community center. So thank you for joining us. For those that are joining us virtually on Facebook Live, feel free, if you have a question and you want to put it in the chat, go ahead. I do have staff that is monitoring the chat. They will try and step out and ask those questions as we go through the presentation. So, feel free to put questions in that chat as you go along. And for those that are here, if you have any questions as we're going through, it's pretty informal. So feel free, stop the presentation, ask the questions. You don't need to save it all up until the end. So I'll be presenting parts of this. I also have with me Tracy Mason. She is our recreation director, and she'll be presenting other pieces of this, really speaking towards existing conditions of the existing Broad Street facility, as well as some of the programming uses for where the community center would be located in the Westfield Avenue. So thank you for joining us. And for those, because we did decide to do Facebook Live, and we're going to try and put this also up on YouTube. So that way, if people aren't able to join us, you can always watch it after the fact on either of those medias. So hopefully this will be beneficial. So the first slide that we are going over is the options explored. So one of the questions that we've had is, what has the town considered? What are the options that we've looked at? And so the town has been exploring options around the existing community center for a number of years, and more recently, and this goes back, the town had approved window replacements for that facility back in 2016, and when it came time for us to begin that portion of the project, it was a larger bonding package. The town council then decided to pause on that project and wait and determine what was the best use overall and what was the best investment overall for the community. And so we never proceeded with that windows project. And in October of 2018, the town engaged with a firm to do two cost analysis. They really were looking for, exploring two options. The two options that were explored were, what would it look like to build a new facility with adjacent fields at another location? So if we just went and built a new facility. The second option that they evaluated was renovating the existing building that we're in, the Broad Street facility, and renovate that facility in an as-new condition. So the town received those cost factors back, and we'll be reviewing those cost factors later on in this presentation. But after getting those back, when I came on as town manager in March of 2019, the town council charged me with looking or exploring a third option, determining if there was an underutilized existing facility that the town currently owned that would be able to house or jointly house our community center. And so I engaged with a firm at that time to evaluate expanding the use of Westfield Avenue to incorporate the community center. And the town council evaluated those results in early of 2020. And it was at the same time that we were evaluating the renovation of the KMS project, which was the removal and replacement of the portable classrooms. And ultimately, the town council prioritized that Killingly Memorial School renovation project. And so this project did not proceed forward at that time. During the budget process for the following budget year, the town council did put in place $50,000 to be earmarked towards the community center, because they recognized that there was a fair amount of potential infrastructure failures, and there was concern about if we needed to do feasibility studies. Since that early 2020 evaluation, there's been a number of additional infrastructure failures at the existing Broad Street facility, and I've provided you a list. Since July of 2020, we've had the air conditioning in the theater. It was July of 2020. We had a heat wave, and typically I've used the community center as a cooling location. We've usually identified it as a cooling location. And in that heat wave, we did identify as a cooling location. And so it's usually the theater. It's the largest area that has air conditioning in that building. We activated that space, and it didn't last 24 hours. The air conditioning died in the theater. And in evaluating how we might be able to get it functional again, we came to the understanding that the coolant for the air conditioning system is no longer manufactured. So they were able to recover enough of it to have it still be able to function, but I've no longer identified the community center as a cooling location for the community because the air conditioning is overly taxed for that area. So we've been limiting the use of that for theater purposes, but we recognize now that when that system goes back down again, it will require a complete replacement of that system. We don't have the ability to continue to revive that existing AC system. So that is in its final legs of functioning. In the end of December of 2020, we had the existing community center was serviced by 2 hot water heaters. One of those hot water heaters failed. It caused a fair amount of water damage in where the hot water heaters are. The whole entire building had to be shut off for water in order for them to be able to eventually isolate out that hot water heater. And ultimately what we ended up doing was removing the hot water. So now that one hot water heater. So the building itself is now only serviced by one hot water heater. And we're in the process of evaluating whether or not that is sufficient for the remainder of the building. We're probably going to need to look at adding back in a hot water heater because one hot water heater is not sufficient to supply that entire building. At the same time that this hot water heater issue was going on, we did have a squirrel infestation. We had one of our staff members went into our theater area and we had about 5 squirrels having a Macbeth production. No, they were running around on the stage. And so that's a hazard to any public utilizing and staff being within the building. So we had to bring in pest extermination to go in, identify where there were potential entry points. And ultimately, we needed to verify that we didn't have any more squirrels left in the building. So we did, in that time frame, identified the soffits as a potential entry point. The soffits in that building are thoroughly deteriorated. There's large holes within the soffits. They're not repairable. We would have to fully replace the soffits at this point on that building. And so we identified tree limbs that were close enough to the roof line that would potentially provide access points. So we did have our highway crews trim back and eliminate one of the trees that was near, that was potentially providing access to the roof line. In the process of having the pest elimination company come through, we did not actually capture any squirrels within the building. So but we were able to feel confident that they had vacated the building. And by removing that tree access and identifying any, doors that may have been left ajar, we were able to be confident that the squirrels were eliminated from the building. Those 2 issues, the hot water heater issue and the squirrel infestation issue, those resulted in the community center being closed for about a week and a half in that time frame. So it was the end of December to the beginning of January of 2021 that we had to close the building. Subsequently, more recently, within the last couple of months, we've had a very significant pipe failure in the 3rd floor women's restroom. So on the 3rd floor of the community center, there is a men's room and a women's restroom. The men's restroom has been closed for many years because of severe deterioration within that restroom. That restroom would require a complete gut and complete renovation before we could reopen it. The ceilings are falling in. The facilities are just not functional. The women's restroom, there's a pipe leak for the toilet facilities, and that pipe was raining into the lower floors of the building. So we had to shut off the third floor women's restroom. And those are the only restrooms on the third floor. And so that services the balcony area of the theater. So now it's still actively closed. We're looking to see if there's a way that we can repair it. The leak has been identified to be along the pipe that's within a wall area going between floors. So we're working to try and see if there's a way that we can remedy that. But at this point, there's no active restrooms available up on the third floor. So when we have the theater production, everybody had to go to the lower floors. And the second floor has...
There's one handicap. It can service one person on the top floor.
Okay.
But
use your mic.
There are downstairs, or the main level where the theater main entrance is, there are 2 restrooms there, and there are 2 stalls in the women's room, 1 stall in the men's room.
Right. So not sufficient or adequate restroom facilities for when you're functioning a 200-seat capacity theater, as they just recently did with The Sound of Music. That is a challenge. And so as these things continued to happen, the town council requested in May of 2021 that the town refresh the proposal to relook at renovating Westfield Avenue, to include that relocation of the community center. At that time, the town engaged with Antonazzi Associates to perform that evaluation. Antonazzi Associates met with the town staff, the Board of Education staff, our building official, fire marshal, to evaluate, and they performed, Antonazzi performed several site visits to evaluate the existing conditions at Westfield Avenue and the deficiencies there. We reviewed security concerns and needs, evaluating what the security concerns or needs would be for EastCon as well as the community center needs, and then reviewed all of the programming for all of the occupants. And we'll go over all those occupants in a minute. I'm going to have Tracy go over with you. These are the upcoming slides are really existing conditions of the community center. So I'm going to turn this over to Tracy.
Thank you. As Mary was stating, I'll just review the bathrooms a little bit. We will get to that. But when I say there's 1 bathroom on the 3rd floor, there is literally 1 bathroom. It is just an ADA 1-stall bathroom there. So on the first slide, on the first picture on your left-hand side, it is one of our many rooms. And I would say any of the rooms that we use pretty much have plastics in the window when it is cold outside. This is due to a variety of gaps or holes that have now become existent over the years as the window frames have deteriorated. They are all original. I should say most of the windows within that building are original. They are single pane windows, and this causes both a problem with our heating and our cooling. We were talking about air conditioning just a little while ago. The only actual air conditioning that exists within the building that is not considered a window unit is in our theater and also in the room just to the left of our theater, which is our concession/dance room that we have. Everything else, in order to try to cool it off, we have to use window units. If anybody's familiar with just using a home window unit or anything like that, our ceilings are very high in there, so it takes a lot of energy and a lot of air conditioners to try to cool that space. While a number of our programs in the summertime do transition to the outdoor spaces, we also have staff that works in there. And that's where we have to use a lot of our window units. When we do have programming, we have to use rooms that have window units as well. And again, like I said, in the winter, as far as heating is concerned, we do use as much plastic as we can with frames. That doesn't cover all of the areas that we have to. Space heaters are utilized. When you utilize space heaters, then you're putting more of a tax on your electrical availability, and sometimes you can be working on something, and if somebody plugged a space heater in, you will lose everything you had on your computer. So those are just some of the issues that we face with that. The next picture over is part of our theater. It is fabric that's on the walls. It is meant to be there to help with the sound that we have in there. Behind, I don't know if you can see it real well, but there is a stain on that bit of cloth there. That is actually, we believe there's a window behind that. So if you match it up, if you go outside and then come back inside, it's another one of those window issues that is there. And those, because of the deterioration of those windows, we're getting leakage. The third photo is one of the many rooms that exists within the department. However, it's an unusable room, unfortunately. We had another room that looked similar to that our maintenance person was able to go in and do a great job reviving again. However, this room, based on the heating and cooling in that room, to give you an example, the furthest over picture is the room that was renovated that looked a lot like that third one. That is the only heater in those two rooms. I don't know if you've ever been around a heater like that, but when it is on, it is very noisy. So you wouldn't be able to hold any type of class or meeting in that room when it's happening. And again, there's no cooling. So that other room right now is being used for storage, which absolutely we need. The other issue with that room right now is the threshold between the hallway and the room itself is so cockeyed that somebody could get injured going in or out. They could easily roll an ankle. They could easily trip over. It's not just a small trip hazard. So we've decided to use that one particular room as storage. Okay. All right. The first photo on this slide is our entryway from the hall down to our gymnasium. This is truly, there's two ways to our gymnasium. This is the safest route. This one here, it's very narrow. Again, we have been grandfathered in as far as a lot of ADA accessibilities. There is no way for us to get anybody who has any type of disability down into our gymnasium, unfortunately, because the only two ways down there are through stairs. The second slide shows the second way down. That's even more of a difficult path to take down to our gymnasium. Not only are the stairs themselves narrow, but as you walk down, you have a danger of hitting your head as well because it's a very low ceiling height as you head down through there. So being able to have a gymnasium that is accessible to all would be wonderful and would really help us maybe expand some of our programming that we do offer to people. That second staircase is also the way that our actors and actresses go up and down to our theater program. So as they get changed from the makeup room or the changing room, they would use that stairwell to access the stage. It's a little dangerous, especially when you have it dark, so that we've put lights on it as much as possible, but you need to have the area dark so as they go on and off of the stage. The third photo is our parking lot. Now, our parking lot used to be smaller than this. The town did acquire a space that was very close, actually adjacent to the property, knock the house down, and have some more parking now exist. However, parking is still a struggle for us. When we have on a certain day, we can have 200 basketball participants and their families in and out on a Saturday morning. If that's also a day that we have a production meeting for the rehearsals in the theater, as well as some other classes. At any given time, we can have anywhere between 300 or so people in that building. In the parking lot back there, I believe we had discussed it's probably about 35, 36 spots. There is a small parking area that is a public parking lot across the street behind that is adjacent to the courthouse. Now, if there's not residents that are already parked there in the evening, that does supply probably about another 15 or so spaces. And then there is on-street parking on Broad Street. That is somewhat of a dangerous area, just based on the speed of the vehicles that go by that area. We do always make sure as best we can that it's as lit as possible as well. But when you have, again, 300 plus people in the building at one point in time, all of these areas are being used. So having additional parking would be extremely helpful. And this really constitutes pretty much outdoor space that we have, which is pretty much nothing over at the community center itself. First picture on this slide is just one of the issues, and this is actually in our hallway. the building, just its age itself, it has shifted, it has settled, and it has caused some of the floorboards to pop out or sink, and therefore we've had to remove some and actually just place something that makes the transition in a hallway a little bit smoother. The second picture just shows a gap of the floor itself and the actual wall. And while us as adults, we would know better, maybe not to be sticking fingers or toes in that areas, if there is a child in there, it still does pose somewhat of a hazard. The next one over is a picture of holes that exist because as we go around the building, as we take rooms and we try to transfer them and do work on them, there's a lot of holes in walls of old electrical that come up, just wirings that came through for telephones that we are now working on. And these type of holes, they will get plugged up, they will get plastered over again. But a lot of times these holes exist, and once you start patching a plaster wall like this, or if you have to tear part of it, a lot more will fall off of it as you go. So it's a bit of a process. The last picture is that men's bathroom that Mary was discussing on the third floor. This bathroom has been closed now for more than a decade, just based on a lot of water damage that prior to the roof being replaced at the community center existed. And so it not only is the ceiling a problem, but the toilets, the entirety of that bathroom would really need a refresh.
So I'm gonna now go over the current use of the Westfield Avenue. So then our next process was to look at the existing Westfield Avenue, what is it currently utilized for, and what available space is there. So currently the Westfield Avenue facility is home to our Board of Education central office. That includes the superintendent's office, their finance office, IT. The KHS wrestling program is utilizing the cafeteria space. There's a community store program and a food bank storage location at that existing facility. Another large use of that facility is EastCon. So EastCon has a lease with the Board of Education. It's a 5-year lease. And they are currently utilizing one hall on the first floor for their lower grades. I think it's their K through 1 or 2, and then the remainder are all on the second floor. So that's the existing utilization of the Westfield Avenue facility. And we identified that the Westfield Avenue facility also has its needs of repair that have needed repair for quite some time. So I'm going to go over some of what those existing conditions are. Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Sure. Good question. So the question was, how much does EastCon pay us each year for the lease? So the lease is with the Board of Education, and they don't actually pay a physical amount of money. What they do is the lease agreement allows Killingly to place, I believe it's 6 or 7 actual students in their program, and Killingly doesn't have to pay for those seats. EastCon would be an out of district placement for Killingly. And so the lease agreement, it's an in-kind lease, which means they receive the use of the facilities in exchange for Killingly getting I believe it's either 6 or 7 seats for free in their program. So it is a benefit to if the town were paying for those seats, the district would be paying about $450,000 a year for those seats in the program. Yes, they have all of those seats filled and then some, which is why they know the exact cost of what we receive in benefit, because they do have to pay for other kids that do have to attend that aren't covered under that lease. So we have those slots fully filled within that program. So it is a savings overall to the district and the town by having EastCon in there as an in-kind. So it's about a $450,000 benefit to the town. So the building itself, there's a number of issues, and we're going to go over what those are. And you can see in the middle picture here, the brick veneer. So that's a picture of the brick veneer. So the rear-facing side of the building, the brick veneer has been separating from the building for quite some time. This has been identified by our the district and by town staff for a couple of decades at this point in time. Well, at least over 15 years, I should say. And it has grown substantially worse. Essentially, the way the structure is, the brick veneer is attached to the main block structural of the building by clay bricks that are turned sideways. That's how it anchors over time, and with water infiltration in between that space, the clay brick that is attaching the brick veneer to the main structure has broken off, but with the shifting of the brick veneer and the concrete, and so that has continued to separate. It is that crack actually runs the full length of that side of the building. There's a number of other cracks along that rear side of the building, and there is concern on the overall safety of that brick veneer to the back side of the building. We're just showing on some of these other pictures the front entrance area. That was actually those white pieces were decorative. Those would just be in this project renovated to to make it more aesthetically pleasing. More significantly, the building, the lower picture to the left-hand side is where the former greenhouse was. This project proposes building a simple shed maintenance garage space over that to rehouse a displaced area. So this is the overall exterior site, and the improvement that we're looking at doing with this project is to add additional parking. So you'll notice in the, if I can get my mouse to work, hang on. Let me get my mouse to work. There it is. So this is the VOAG section of the building, right? That little space right there. And we currently utilize the cafeteria space, which is kind of towards the front here. We use that space for our elections, for our polling location. And it's been identified for a number of years that parking is challenging for when we have polling locations. And moving the community center over there, the community center's main entrance would be the VOAG space over here. That's where the main entrance would be. And so given the amount of activity that the community center sees, we see that there's a need for additional parking on that side of the building specifically to better address polling location needs, as well as, the hope would be that the Veterans Coffee House would come back, the Danielson Veterans Coffee House would come back to the community center. They were with the community center for quite some time until they really outgrew the space that they were, that the community center had to offer them. And it would also better benefit the overall utilization of the community center. So that's the main exterior. This is just some conceptual designs of what the entrance to the new community center would look like. And again, this is the former VOAG entrance to the Westfield Avenue property. And here is the proposed conceptual layout of, what the building would look like and what the entities would be within the building. So everything in orange is considered Board of Education spaces. And so you'll note that the first one, that maintenance storage facility, that's over the old greenhouse. All of this green, that's all community center space. So this is the vestibule coming into the community center. There is office space, some program space, other staff space through here. There's some multi-purpose rooms. I'm going to walk you through the entire floor plan, and then I'll let Tracy speak more specifically to what the utilizations would be within those program rooms. She can better speak to that. This orange that you're seeing here is the Board of Education space. So some of it is existing, what they're currently utilizing. So the maintenance vehicle space, that's where they're currently maintaining their vehicles. The school IT, so that the fiber for the district and really for the town all enter into here at the school IT space, and they do all their main coordination of their school IT from that space. We would rehome the wrestling program from the cafeteria, and we would dedicate them to have space back here to the rear of the building. So they have exterior access directly towards that field space. They have a dedicated wrestling area here. And we would also incorporate adding a parent waiting room. So the wrestling program used to be in our community center. They had been in the community center space for quite some time. The main reason why they had to be moved over to the Westfield Avenue was because the floor at the community center and the spaces that they were using in the community center was no longer able to hold or support the weight of the program between the mats, the equipment, and the people. And it was starting to compromise the flooring. So the program moved over here. And so we had a pretty good understanding of what it looks like for the KHS wrestling program and their feeder program for wrestling, and what the parent weight is. Tracy has seen the many parents sitting on the floors and hallways waiting for kids. So we really felt it was important to give those parents a designated location, a waiting room that they have that can be more comfortably accommodating to them, and then allow for the KHS their weight room. Really, this is their workout room, their weight room. So they have their weight room and their gym storage. So that's all Board of Education space. You're seeing on here this big yellow space. That is the gymnasium and then part of the kitchen. The gymnasium would be considered a shared common space. So EastCon will need to utilize the gym during their school day as part of their educational program. And so during the day, the gymnasium would be dedicated as EastCon space. When EastCon ends their day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it would flip to community center space. And so it would be programmed by the community center from that point on. The green space down below that you're seeing here is the space for the cafeteria, Veterans Coffee House. It could be it's a multi-use planning space. They could run their community center could run their squeaky sneakers program out of here. But one of the key components with regards to the cafeteria space is that two components. One, we identified that if we hold a program in there during the day while EastCon is in operation, the primary restrooms for use by those occupants would be within EastCon's hallway. We want to make sure that for security purposes for EastCon as well as the community center, we want to make sure that we keep those activities separated. So the proposal that we have in the project is to install restrooms actually within the cafeteria space. So the restrooms would be right there in the same room area. That would allow for people that are participating in a program right here in the cafeteria. They would have adjacent restrooms available to them. It does provide a serving space, a smaller serving location in the kitchen area that would be dedicated to the community center. And then the other way that we have kept it separate is the doors that go over here into the hallway that EastCon utilizes, which is also EastCon's main entrance. Those would be shifted to security doors. So if somebody were to try and exit out those doors, they would be able to be exitable for fire purposes. But if somebody were to try and exit out those doors, they would be alarmed. So that way, the community center and or EastCon would be aware that somebody came through the cafeteria and entered into EastCon space. And that's important for both programs. The yellow for the kitchen area is really shown as shared. The existing Board of Education does use some of the refrigerator and storage space over here, food storage space for their bulk storage, for their other cafeterias, but there is no actual cafeteria use by the Board of Education or by EastCon. EastCon receives all of their lunches and does all of their lunches in their individual classrooms. It works better for their programming needs. Yep. Yeah, so in the new one, we would actually, how we're currently accessing it off of the parking lot, right? We would access it only, instead of only having a single door, we would make that double doors for proper egress purposes. We would make those a full double door and correct the ADA access component to it to make it a proper ADA access from the parking lot. So the question was, how does the public access the cafeteria in the new plan? And that's how they would access. Good question. This is the other half of the first floor. So going along the very top of the screen, you're seeing all that green, and that's all community center space, which wraps around to the right-hand side of the screen where the auditorium is. That, again, is all community center space. I just want to note here, there are 2 programs that we identified earlier on that are in the existing facility that we want to make sure that we retain in the facility. And that is the community store. The community store currently right now is utilizing the lower rooms, the music room and the band room for space. In the proposed plan, we would flip them to the other side. It does still give them, it actually gives them direct external access, so they could have the public directly access their store from the outside of the building, as well as getting their deliveries from directly from the outside of the building, and not having to go through internal hallways for that. The other program is the food bank storage. So that is the community kitchen the food storage, and so this space is currently the one that's currently the food bank, where it says food bank. That is currently a vehicle storage area for the Board of Education. So it has a roll up, an overhead door that's right there. So our proposal would be to move the food bank into that space. They receive a lot of deliveries that are on pallets. That would be better access for them to receive it through an overhead door. And then they also they have that direct access to the external. So that is the modification. The dark line that you see between the food bank and the shared workspace, that is the only interior wall change in the entire program. We're looking at moving the interior wall where those hashed lines are through here in that shared workspace. We're looking at moving them over to give a larger space for that shared workspace. That workshop space is for the theater. It's for theater storage. It's for them to create those props and those backgrounds, as well as just in general workshop space for our maintainer that would assist in maintaining the community center spaces of this facility. So I will turn it over to Tracy for her to, before I do that, the purple here is the EastCon space. That's what EastCon is currently utilizing. And then the purple in the very lower bottom of the screen, that is the Board of Education's offices. You will note that at the end of the hallway where the EastCon space is, you're seeing double doors. Those don't exist right now. Those are proposed new doors. Those are security doors. Those would be closed. So it would secure off EastCon's hallway. They are still utilizable for fire and egress access. But it would prevent, a general public person that's visiting for the community center purposes from just directly accessing EastCon's space, as well as it allows EastCon to be able to maintain that their students within their space. So you see the security doors within these hallways, and security doors are also proposed for the second floor, which is at the top of all the stairwells. This is the second floor, and you'll know it's all purple. That's EastCon. There's security doors at the tops of all of these stairs, so that way if somebody were to get into the stairwells and they get up to the second floor, they don't have direct access to EastCon space. It provides that security and separation. So I'm going to turn this over to Tracy for her to go over the more in detail, kind of the community center proposals.
All right. So we're starting back at the beginning here of our first slides, showing the rooms. One thing that I do need to mention is obviously you saw the parking, the difference as far as the number of parking and the availability that is actually off-street and next to the community center entrance. The other thing is it's not really shown here too much, except in the previous overhead picture, is field space availability. To be able to do field programming not only during the daytime but in the evening as well, which is something that we do not have at the current center. One of the reasons that this makes a lot of sense for us is that our current building, we have to have at least 2 of our doors unlocked, one in the front of the building to allow people to access that way, and one in the rear, which is our ADA accessible, as well as for our back parking lot. This does not give us a lot of security. We don't necessarily know who is coming and going in that building at all times. We do have some cameras set up, but it's very difficult to monitor once somebody is in that building or even how they're getting in. And there are multiple doors as well that people can get out of and if they've been left ajar, get into. So this would supply us the availability of having that one main entrance where we would have our offices located. So anybody who comes in, the office and a window is right there. We would see anybody coming in that way. If we were hosting something in the cafeteria and it was during EastCon school hours, obviously they would come in that main entrance and we would have someone there as well. And if we had our theater program happening, there is an entrance on that side of the building that we would be able to monitor, but we would also be able to lock if we weren't using that area. So any of the smaller programs or programs utilizing our classroom space that we would have in this building, they would all enter through that one entrance, again, where our office is, and we would be able to know who is in the building from us. As stated on that left-hand side there, would have our main office. It would also have offices for director's office, assistant director, recreation supervisor. It does have a wonderful room that it's a meeting room, or it could be a programming room that is either a double room or can be sectioned off into 2 rooms. That is some area that we utilize currently for our day camp program in the summer. It's our Camp Wallaby program. This past year, we had about 120 children that took part in that, and we would look to utilize that space as well. As Mary mentioned, the gymnasium space would be turned back over to us at the 2 o'clock time or over on the weekends. That gym space, if you know what the gym space looks like at the community center, it's probably at least 3 times the size of. It allows us to have 2 full courts running at the same time because there is a curtain that can be pulled in between there. It does allow us as well to be able to, if you want to run some kind of a tournament or if you wanted to do something along those lines. So as far as revenue is concerned, it can be used to produce a little bit more revenue in those ways, which we don't have that availability at our current location. The drawback is that we would not have a gymnasium during the daytime. It would affect a few programs, being our drop-in basketball, drop-in pickleball. We could relocate, as Mary said, our squeaky sneakers program to another room. And we would just work around to try to find other times, maybe dates, in which we could have those other programs that would take place either in the afternoon or the evening somewhere else. The cafeteria, again, we have a cafeteria where we are at now. It is a small cafeteria. The size of this cafeteria would not only allow us to do programming, whether it be our Squeaky Sneakers program or some type of fitness program, but it would allow us to expand any of our special event offerings, such as breakfast with Santa, if we did breakfast with the bunny, anything like that that we currently do, we could offer it to more people. This also offers us the opportunity, again, for a revenue source for people who may want to rent that space to do, whether it's pancake breakfasts or anything like that. And along with the theater program there, we could also offer a dinner theater. So you could go to dinner and then you could head right over to the theater. So lots of things already going on in staff's head and how we can utilize this space even more. The second slide here, the rooms towards the back of the building, those would be programming space, meeting space. Well, we currently have a weight and cardio room now. It's actually 3 smaller rooms that are in the community center, and we would look to keep that type of space available for people. It has cardio equipment. We do have some weight equipment, and hopefully we would be able to expand that as well. We have currently a room that I don't want to say it's dedicated completely towards yoga, but we run a lot of yoga programs. We do run some also children's music and movement classes because it is a space that has a rug and can be utilized that way. We would look to use a room for that. We would also need a couple of those rooms for storage for a number of programs that we do run as well. Currently, we have different groups that meet with us. There are veteran groups. We have Girl Scout groups, Boy Scout groups. We have different groups like that would come in, and we would keep a few of those rooms open as well to be able to rent those spaces out as need be. All the way to the right, we do have that shared space, as Mary said, for not only the building maintainer, but also for our theater. The building maintainer currently has a workshop within our community center. So if he has to do any work on any of the buildings, but he needs to do something specific where he requires certain equipment, that is currently located in the community center. So that helps replace that as well. It's not just for that one building, it would be for all buildings that he maintains. The stage area, in the theater area, again, we run a wonderful little theater program now. It sits 225 people. It is flat seating on the ground. This would allow us to have more stadium type seating, which is more beneficial. And we would be able to run larger productions, not only with the audience that we would take in. I believe there's over 800 seats in this particular auditorium now. But the stage itself would allow us to run larger productions as well for who we have coming in and what we're able to do with the stage. The bottom two rooms there, which are currently listed as music rooms, we would look to continue to use those as music rooms, as other meeting space. It would also be an area that we have to keep props for our theater program, as well as costumes. We currently have a room now that is full of costumes, and another area that's full of props. So again, that gives you an idea of what we would be doing in those spaces.
This is the second floor that we talked about, was dedicated as EastCon space. So let's talk about the building condition. I kind of talked about this a little bit before. So the Westfield Avenue facility, as it stands right now, does require a capital investment for us to continue to use it in its existing use as the superintendent central office space, as with the EastCon lease, and those other two programs and the wrestling program utilizing it. And so these are the major systems that need replacement on that facility, regardless of the community center. This is just to keep that building functional. So number one is the roof. The roof has long passed its useful life. There has been leaks. They've been patching them, but again, they continue to have water infiltration. The windows, and we'll see some other pictures of this. The windows, there's some windows that have substantial gaps between the windows and the walls at this point. In the backside where the brick veneer is, the windows are kind of pulling away from the building as the brick veneer pulls away from the building. The boiler and the HVAC systems, none of the facility is HVAC. There is a couple of rooms, I shouldn't say none of them. There's a couple of rooms in the Board of Education space that they do have individual units that they're utilizing for cooling, but and EastCon utilizes some portable air conditioning systems, but the boiler, the heating, and the HVAC system would need to be addressed. We've discussed the brick veneer. That is becoming a safety concern. ADA compliance with the entrances and the restrooms. There has not been any ADA compliance updates done to that facility at all. And the electrical panel and the fire panel need to be updated. So those two are in need of updating. So again, all of these conditions exist, and those will eventually need to be addressed, even if the community center doesn't go here. So when I was doing my evaluations, and this is some examples of those interior and exterior conditions. So this is the cafeteria in the top left-hand corner. You can see the ceiling, the bowing of the ceiling. That would be replacing. The next picture over, and the one little subset picture, that's the hallway nearest the theater. You'll note along the top, you can see the water infiltration that's coming in along the very top of near the windows. We're getting a lot of water infiltration. It's breaking apart the sills, and it's damaging the lower part as well. So those are some examples of that. The hall. The last one is a picture of the hallway. One of the good benefits of that building is the hallway floors are terrazzo floors, and they are in really good condition. So we really wouldn't need to do really any major renovation to the hallway floors at all. They are in really good condition, but We would need to address the ceilings, as well as some of the pipes that are in the ceilings, the water pipes. There's some active leaking in some of the water pipes in the ceiling, in the hallway areas that would need to be addressed. This is an example of a conceptual idea of the cafeteria use as the Veterans Coffee House, also with the Squeaky Sneakers program. And a conceptual idea around what the community store could look like, and then what the food bank area would look like. And we put those in because we recognize that while they are not a community center program, and while they are not a Board of Education program, they are actively utilized programs and valued programs by the community, both that community store and our community kitchens, soup kitchens. Those are very valuable programs, and we want to make sure that we have identified space for them. And then we have a conceptual with just the utilization of the gymnasium. The gymnasium itself, we have some refreshing that we're looking to do in the gymnasium, like putting in the new scoreboards, updating the mats along the walls, and redoing some of the curtain. But overall, the gymnasium itself is in relatively good shape. So when we're going to go over the numbers now. So when I was getting the price estimates from Antonazzi, I specifically asked it to be given to us in two numbers. One, what is the cost of investment in Westfield Avenue to just keep the building as it exists in its current condition, or in its current use, right? So how do we maintain its current use? Because we identified, even if the Board of Education is still there, EastCon is still there, it needs a roof. It needs windows. It needs brick veneer, right? So I asked them to give us that, so that way the community could better understand what the investment level is going to need to be in that facility, because it is still an actively utilized facility. And then I asked for a second number for what the renovation cost would be attributable to putting the community center in that space. So that is the renovations within those spaces. That's the renovations for the restrooms and the ADA access to those restrooms, as well as security upgrades throughout the facility in order to be able to secure all of the different uses of that facility with the community center going in. So this slide that you have before you is really the cost comparison of all three options that the town has explored. So we talked about how the town explored in 2018 building a brand new facility. And in 2018, that number was a little over $27.7 million. That estimate of $27.7 million did not include the purchasing of land or the site costs that go with developing that land. Because if you don't know what the land looks like, you don't know what your site costs are going to be. So that number did not include those two figures. So in order to be able to compare it to what is the community looking at right now, I needed to escalate that number for construction escalation, because that was a 2018 construction cost estimate at the 27.7. So working with with Antonazzi, the architect, they gave us a percentage to use of 5% per year for the escalation factor. That increases that cost by just over $7.6 million. So if we are looking at a 2023 build, which is equivalent to what the renovation project that the town has before it now, a 2023 build, you're looking at, for constructing a new facility, almost $35.4 million. That is to build a community center. Again, the town would still need to make an investment in Westfield Avenue, and the renovations needed for the envelope of that building to maintain operation of that facility, which again that 14.6 number is the number that we received from the current evaluation. So the investment by the community for both operations, the Westfield Avenue renovation, just renovating for Westfield Avenue's existing use, and building a new community center, puts that investment at just over $50 million. And again, that doesn't include the purchase of land or additional site work that goes with that land. The next one that the town had looked at back in 2018 was renovating the existing Broad Street facility as new. So renovate the existing community center as new. And that total project cost 2018 construction cost came in at just over $21.2 million. So again, we have to escalate that to bring it apples to apples so we compare what the current actual construction cost would be. So that, bringing that to a 2023 build, you're looking at a per project cost of just over $27.1 million. And that's just to renovate. That would be just for the community center to renovate the Broad Street facility as new in the current facility. That does not include any expanded parking, and there's still the limitations of having no external space at the existing Broad Street facility. Those are things that we can't change about that existing facility. And that's an investment of just over $27.1 million. Again, adding in the cost for renovating Westfield Avenue to maintain its existing use at the $14.6 million puts a total community investment for both buildings at just under $41.8 million. The lower portion of this slide reflects what the current project is that is before the townspeople for consideration. So this is the combined renovation of Westfield Avenue to renovate the envelope of that building as it would need to be renovated in order to maintain its existing use. That's where that $14.6 million comes from. That's what we were using in the upper two calculations as well. And then the cost to renovate to include the costs around including the renovation for the community center. So all those green spaces and converting that into community center space, as well as in putting in those additional security features that are needed for that site. That total project cost is just over $27.7 million. The authorization request before the townspeople at this point is $27.8 million. And that reflects pricing for a 2023 construction cycle, because that would be when it would go under construction. And as a note, again, the annual escalation cost on this is just under $1.4 million. So if it's each year that we move out on this, that's the additional cost associated with that. The next slide really outlines those selective upgrades to the Westfield Avenue facility and the upgrades that are necessary for the community center. You'll note that this is really in 4 buckets, right? So there's the Board of Education space itself. There's the community center space itself. The East Con, you'll note that there's not much reflected here for investment in the East Con space. And then there's the shared common space, and that would be all the hallways. That's the envelope of the building. Think the roof, the windows, the brick veneer. All of those are envelope things that are common shared space that aren't necessarily attributable to necessarily one entity. So the Board of Education space, this includes doing the HVAC for all of the lower floor Board of Education spaces. So it properly manages all of the HVAC components for the lower floor. The community center space also has HVAC for all of the community center spaces, including the cafeteria, the gymnasium, and the theater. So all of those spaces would be appropriately HVAC'd. It does include upgrading all of the heating components for those spaces as well. This project does not include adding in air conditioning or HVAC, the air conditioning components for the second floor for the East Con space, because we chose not to include that in this project. It's about a $2 million investment to also include HVACing the second floor. Because East Con is considered a private entity, we wanted to be respectful of the community's investment. The project is is slated to stub up for all of that, so it would be easily incorporated. So they wouldn't have to rework a whole bunch of stuff. It would be able to be stubbed up for that, but it would be a matter of a conversation or determining the long-term use of that, if EastCon's going to remain there, if that's an investment or a shared investment that the community in EastCon wants to do into the building, but recognizing that the second floor is used solely by a private entity. We did not include the ACing the entire second floor in this. We will stub up for all the electrical and any of the other components that will need to be to allow for that expansion to occur. So we're not having to do any duplicated efforts down the road, but that's being a $2 million investment. That was a substantial investment. Yes. So the question was, is EastCon aware that the town has made? Yes. So we have had that conversation with EastCon. They are aware. One of the things that they identified was with regards to the electrical. So they're having challenges around when they plug in one of their air conditioning units, they might pop a fuse or something like that. So we're aware of those. We're going to try and work through those concerns within this project, but we are not installing new HVAC units independently within that space. Good question. So how does this impact the mill rate? That's always the next question. So really the slide that you have before you is two different scenarios of how this might impact the mill rate. And there are several assumptions that we do when we create this slide, right? So one is whenever we look at mill rate impact, we always assume the current grand list. So we're assuming that the existing grand list is the same grand list, same number that would be in place in 2024 when the actual debt impact would happen. And so what I would say to that is that this is really kind of worst case scenario because it doesn't incorporate things like what we know to be a fact, Frito-Lay's expansion that's coming online. This doesn't include any of that impact to our mill rate, that growth in our mill rate. It doesn't, or growth in our grand list. It doesn't include any of that. We've had a number of other businesses go through expansions and changes that have not hit the grand list as of yet. And so those expansions on our grand list are not reflected here. We are using as though this were hitting our expenditures right now. And that's why I say the dark brown line is really what would be considered a worst case scenario. And so the dark brown line assumes that the entire $27.8 million is bonded. And you'll note that the first payment for that debt would be in fiscal year 2024. And then we show that impact increases over a steady 3 years. Killingly has historically and we continually, when we're authorized to bond for a project, we don't just go out and bond all of the money right up front. We bond as we need it through the project. So as we expend a certain amount or as we foresee large amounts of expenditure happening, we bond for what is needed for two reasons. One, we're only borrowing then what we actually need to borrow. So if the project comes in less, we're not borrowing more than we need to. We always borrow only what it is that we actually need to borrow. And that's why you see the last portion of that debt doesn't come on until 2026. This project is slated to be about a 2-year process to do the renovations. And we would bond the final component after the completion of those of that project. So then again, we're borrowing only what we need to borrow. In totality, across the 3 years, we're looking at an annual increase of approximately 0.6 mils over the 3 years. So it comes to a 0.8 mil increase in totality under that scenario of bonding the full 27.8 million. The alternative that I have here listed is for consideration, and I brought this to the town council, is potentially utilizing some of fund balance and some of the ARP money that the town has availability to, and dedicating funds from those two sources to reduce the amount that's bonded. The town has a healthy fund balance where about 20% of our overall operating budget is in our fund balance. The town has been very diligent about its utilization of fund balance and cognizant of how it may impact the town's credit rating agency. So when we're going out to borrow money, how does fund balance impact that? Utilizing fund balance for a project like this would not be detrimental or have a negative impact to our credit rating. And so the possibility is there to use potentially $2.5 million of fund balance. And with the ARPA funds, the town can utilize what has been the calculated revenue loss towards a project like this. And that calculated revenue loss is $2.6 million. So there's the potential of activating $5.1 million for this, an air market towards this project. Those are separate actions that would have to be taken. Those are not actions that would be taken right here with this authorization. Those would be taken at a later date, and both the use of fund balance would require a public hearing and a special town meeting for those monies to be appropriated. So these are conceptual only. But if the town were to choose to go down that path and utilize those, it would lessen the amount of debt that the town would have to issue and thereby lessen the mill rate impact. And so you'll see in the first year, it's a substantially lower impact on mill rate. And overall, you're looking at a mill rate impact of 1.5 over in totality by activating those other alternative funding mechanisms to lower the amount of debt that's actually issued for the project. To offset some of that. What does it mean? What does a 1.84 mil impact mean to a taxpayer? So my son just bought a house in Killingly, and so we were talking about 1.84 mils. What does that even mean? I don't understand what that means. So these are just snapshots and really kind of benchmarks, if you will. I highly encourage anybody who wants to go over what is the exact impact to my property. There is a calculator on our website. Go to the website. You can pull up what your property card says as your assessed value. There's a calculator there. You can put in these numbers and have it actually calculate what is the difference, what is the change for you. But just for a concept, if I did 3 different scenarios, right? So I took an estimated market value of $150,000. So if you have a property that's estimated value is $150,000, that would mean that your assessed value, because we only assess at 70% of that value, so your assessed value would be $105,000. So a 1.84 mill rate increase is a total annual increase of $193. Now, again, this phases in over 3 years, so I included what that annual year increase would be over those 3 years that we talked about, with the first year starting at fiscal year 2024, the next one 2025, finally at 2026. So that's the increase each year over the 3 years. But ultimately, at the end of the 3 years, your impact is the $193. Subsequently, if the town were to proceed with appropriating $2.5 million from the fund balance and utilizing and activated those ARPA funds towards this project, and we didn't have to bond the full $27.8 million, that would result in a mill rate impact of 1.53, which gives an estimated impact of $161 for this first column, and then again broken out for the impacts for those 3 years. I did the same evaluation for someone who has an estimated market value of a $300,000 residence. What does that look like? And the assessed value for a $300,000 market value is $210,000, and that gives an estimated full impact of $386. And again, right below that shows that phase in of how much increase per year over the 3 years that would be. And then if again we activate those additional funding opportunities, That lessens the impact to a 1.53 mil, which for an estimated market value home of 300,000 is an estimated annual impact of $321. And then lastly, I did the value, estimated market value home of 500,000, and you can see what those impacts are for that one. So if you have an estimated market value home of 500,000, then your assessed value is 350,000. So for the full total project bonded cost, that's an estimated annual impact of $644. If we activate the utilization of fund balance and ARPA funds, that's an increase of $535 per year. So I gave these as examples. Again, I encourage everyone to go onto the website. If you can't find it, or if you don't understand how that functions or what to put in, give a call to my office. Call the town manager's office. I'm gladly walk that through with anyone. Call the assessor's office as well. If you're not, you can't find where that assessed value is on your property card, feel free to call. We're more than willing to walk through that with anyone, so that way everyone knows exactly what is the actual impact to their individual scenario. You can't put all those scenarios up on a screen. So this was just to give some benchmark ideas. Recognize that property value, the property card, everybody is cognizant that in the last year, market values on homes have gone all over the place. They've risen substantially over the last couple of years. That's not necessarily reflected in your property card, right? So don't think about, well, what would I put my house on the market for right now? It's really about what your house was valued at when we did our last revaluation, which was 3 years ago, right? So that's the market value that we're thinking of, not necessarily what you would put it on the market for today, because I think that's substantially different than where it was 3 years ago when we did our last revaluation. So I urge everyone to definitely go on, look up your property cards, that way you know exactly what your assessed value is for your property, and then do the calculations. That way you know how it impacts you. The last piece is, what's the important dates? What does everybody need to have on the radar? So the town council is holding their public hearing on the capital project at 7 p.m. November 9th here at the town meeting room in the town hall. That's an opportunity for the public to give feedback to the town council about the project. The same night, on November 9th, the town will be holding a special town meeting at 8 p.m. here in the town meeting room. There will be no votes taken during that special town meeting. That is, again, time for the public to discuss and deliberate the project, but it won't be voted on at that time. It will adjourn to an all-day machine vote that will be held on November 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. at the public library, at the community room in the public library. So I know that's a different polling location than we do for the traditional elections. It is, but it has been utilized many times in the past when we do a capital project referendum. So it's at the public library in the community room, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., same normal polling times. Absentee ballots would be available at the town clerk's office on November 10th for the project. So those are the important dates. The next slide shows what the actual ballot question will be. So everyone is aware of what the ballot question will be. It says, shall the town of Killingly appropriate $27,800,000 for improvements to Westfield Avenue School, including renovations needed to serve as a community center, and authorizing the issuance of bonds and notes in the same amount? And it further shows that, voters approving this ordinance will vote yes. Those that oppose will vote no. And again, goes over what that the voting is held at the public library. And it's in our community room, November 16th. And that's the end of the presentation. Do you have any more questions? Go for it. I will try, just so you know, I'm going to try and relay your question. Or if you want to, you're welcome to come up and grab a mic, and you can, that way I don't have to relay. It's up to you. Whatever you're more comfortable with. It's fine. Just make sure you turn on the microphone. It's up to you. It's fine.
Just a couple questions unforeseen circumstances that we may find?
Sure. Sure. So that's a great question. So with every renovation project, that we always know that we're opening up walls and we're opening up areas that may have unforeseen. So there are contingencies that are built into this cost estimation. This cost estimation is based on conceptual design and initial evaluations. I will say that our architects spent a fair amount of time going through that building. I did also, as a secondary independent estimate, to make sure that we were evaluating everything, especially around the electrical components of this, I actually brought in independently a construction manager firm that did a separate cost estimate. They came out and spent a good portion of a day at that building, poking into and looking where they could behind walls that, you know, maybe had spaces that they could see behind. They were really confident with the condition around the brick veneer. They were able to see inside one of the areas, so they could really see what was happening back behind the brick veneer. So they're pretty confident. They were pretty confident with the cause of that. And both our Antonazzi and the other construction manager firm spent a fair amount of time evaluating the electrical components of that facility, which is one of the other major potentially big shifting areas for that renovation. So we're pretty confident that we have really solid evaluation of what we're going to encounter. One of the benefits that we have with this project is that we're not moving walls. And that typically you can run into a lot more difficulties when you're moving walls. We're not moving walls. We have been able to look into the drop ceiling areas to be able to identify issues or components that are up in the ceilings that might need to be addressed. But with this, there is construction contingency as well as owner's contingency that has been built in. So the construction managers price came in $300,000 difference than the architects that we have presented before the town. So very solid numbers done independently. So we knew that and I purposely went with a construction manager because they're the ones actually doing the construction, and they would know what current costs are for subcontractors that would be needed for this project. And so I wanted to make sure that we had current and solid numbers. Yeah, we would look for a construction manager at risk for this job, similar to what we're doing with the KMS project. They just hired, the Permanent Building Commission just selected Downs Construction for the KMS project. And we would look to go for a construction manager at risk for this project as well. There's a fair amount of components that are going on. It will be occupied during the renovation, which will require some phasing that needs to go along with that, with EastCon's program and with just the Board of Education as well. So we will need to do some phasing with that. Having a construction manager at risk on board during the design phase. So we will go for a construction manager at risk, not just a GC, because we want to have them on board during the design phase so we can make sure that we're identifying any of those challenges before we get to bidding the documents.
You mentioned before in one of the other ones that KHS payoff
Yeah, so
is coming up.
yeah, so the KHS debt. So the debt service that the town incurred for building the new high school, that debt service starts to come off the books in 2026. We had our first bond issuances in 2006, so that starts coming off in 2026. It completely comes off in 2032. 2032 is our last debt payment for that, and then our debt load drops substantially after that.
So if there's projects for Goodyear, KIS,
Yes.
ACS, or
Yep.
any renovations or upgrades?
Yeah, so all of those buildings will, those are all buildings that still need renovations to occur to them. And so that's one of the things that we always look at with regards to our debt load. By bringing a project on like this, how will it strap the town for long periods of time? So we looked at our debt our debt policy guide that we have for debt service is for it to be between 6 and 8% of our 6%, no more than 8% of our general operating budget. This project, the final year when you get the full debt load on of this, so 2026, it peaks at just over 7.5% of the debt service load, but then it immediately starts dropping down because we start the high school debt starts coming off. So there is adequate space that if we needed to bond for the KCS or Goodyear, and also the benefit to those is when we look at doing a renovate as new for Goodyear, KCS, KIS, any of those are eligible for Office of School Construction grants, right? And so we would activate those grants. The town has been receiving about 72% grant funding for that under that category. And so our share of that cost is substantially lower. And so the impact to that debt is a lot less, right? It's not nearly as high as this. For this property, we did engage Office of School Construction to see if it would have any eligibility for Office of School Construction grants, right? We wanted to see if there was any grant availability out there. So Board of Education staff, my staff, we met with, and the architect, we met with the director of Office of School Construction and reviewed the entire project with him. And there were only two components that would be eligible or potentially eligible for any grants. It was the roof replacement and the window replacement. Everything else he deemed repair and not eligible. And so those two components would be eligible for reimbursement based on the square footage of the Board of Education space only, not including EastCon, just the Board of Education space. And that then is also reduced. Our grant, our 72% amount that we usually receive for grant is cut in half because it's only Board of Education central office space. So with that information, our architect, Antonazi, went back and broke that all out. You know, what's the windows cost? What's the roof cost? Calculated it all out. That came to a total grant amount at the highest amount of $188,000. My recommendation to the town council was not to proceed with trying to obtain the $188,000 from Office of School Construction because that would delay our construction cycle. So we would potentially have to increase the budget higher in order to obtain $188,000. It wasn't cost effective to go after that $188,000. So the project that's before the townspeople does not include looking at trying to go for that $188,000 in grant money. It would have cost the town more to try and go after that. Because they're considered a private entity, yes. And so we tried that. We spent a fair amount of time talking to the director around that, and he indicated that they're considered a private entity. They are not Killingly Public Schools. They are a separate entity that is leasing space from the town, and so they would not be considered a public school, even though I recognize that they have funding through the state as well. Even with that, we tried to push that envelope, and he held fast to it's not Killingly Public Schools. They are a private entity.
I got one you might not know.
Sure.
Utility costs for both buildings, the Broad Street and
Westfield Ave. Yeah, so with Broad Street, the utility costs right now are about $60,000 a year. The Westfield Avenue one, that's a little bit more challenging to answer because right now in its unrenovated state, there's a fair amount of inefficiencies, right? We have windows that have huge gaps in them. We have a roof that's leaking. They did incorporate solar, so the parking lot, they have parking lot stanchion solar out there, which does mitigate the electrical costs out there, and I don't have that figure. But those numbers will all change as we have new heating systems, new HVAC systems that are energy efficient, as well as the envelope of the building is resecured. So that I don't really have a solid answer to give you.
that's all I got.
Okay. Did we have any questions On Facebook. Okay. So I'm not seeing any virtual questions. Thank you for attending. Thank you for all those that watched us on Facebook. And for those that are going to still watch us on Facebook, if you have any questions after you watch this, always feel free to contact the town manager's office or even reach out to Tracy Mason on the rec department. Gladly will go through any of the questions or any concerns that anyone might have around the project. And again, just to remind everyone, virtually, the public hearing and special town meeting, November 9th, here at the town hall. Public hearing is at 7 p.m. Special town meeting is at 8 o'clock. No vote happens at that special town meeting. The vote happens on November 16th, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. The community room at the public library is when that vote will take place. So thank you all.
We have a question.
Oh, we do have a question.
We do have a question. It's a long one, so
Okay.
I'll break it down. It says, referring to the cost slide, there were two options, correct? Build a new community center and renovations to Westfield, and then 2, renovations to Broad Street and renovations to Westfield Ave. My question, why hasn't a third option for one new building for both the community center operations and Westfield Ave operations be developed? Could those cost numbers be shown?
Okay, so that's a good question. So we have done build a new community center. There was actually 3 options. I have the slide up. So there were 3 options that were displayed. One is build a new facility, build a new community center facility, and the renovations to the Westfield Avenue, renovate the existing Broad Street facility, and then showing below the project costs for renovating the Westfield Avenue. The town and the Board of Education has not sought services or feasibility study around building an entire new facility for what the Board of Education needs and program needs might be for those spaces. So what we were looking at, what I was tasked to do by the town council, was to look at an underutilized building, which the Westfield Avenue building isn't fully utilized. It was underutilized for what its existing use is, and whether or not the community center could be located within that space to fully maximize the use of that existing town facility and consolidate facilities. So that was what was tasked with. So the town would have to, the Board of Education, because the Westfield Avenue facility is Board of Education activities and programs, they would have to look to have engage with a firm to do that evaluation and study and cost estimate for that. All right. I think we've answered all questions. Again, I appreciate everyone taking the time. Feel free to reach out to my office or Tracy's office if anybody has any questions. Thank you all. Have a great, I got one more question.
It says, would a completely new rebuild of the community center on Broad Street have created more square footage beyond what the renovations will create with existing rooms not being able to be utilized? And there's another spot, so I'll let you answer that one first.
So the renovate is new for the existing Broad Street facility would not create any additional square footage for use at the Broad Street. Westfield Avenue would still provide more usable square footage for the community center versus renovate is new at the Broad Street facility.
And the second part of that was, if that was the case, do we have any idea how potential new programs would impact existing space after a renovation? So I think you've answered that.
Yeah, there wouldn't be any additional new spaces at Broad Street.
Okay.
But good questions. All right. Thank you all for taking the time. Have a great day, everyone.